Hi, I'm R. O'Donnell, and welcome to Interviews at the Undertown.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet, and welcome to the 13th Annual Port Townsend Film Festival.
It's great to be here.
And I can see from your name tag, you're Matt Murray.
I am indeed.
And you're co-producer and co-writer of the film High Ground. Tell us a little bit about the film.
The film follows 11 wounded veterans that we took to Nepal in 2010 to climb a 20,000-foot mountain. So they're all Iraq and Afghanistan veterans that have had significant wounds, both physical and mental. And we took them there to give them an outdoor experience and then hopefully transition that into a healing process for them.
And what was the journey on that? I mean, from concept, why that subject matter?
Kind of a long story. There's Eric Weinmeier is the only blind climber to ever summit Everest. And in 2001...
And he's in the film.
Yes, he is in the film. In 2001, he and his team summited Everest, and it was filmed by our director, Michael Brown, in a movie called Farther Than the Eye Can See. And Michael and Eric were talking about the 10th anniversary and what could they do. And they had met up with a group called World Team Sports, which is a veterans organization that does primarily bike rides across the country. And the president, Jeff Messmer, said, hey, I'd like to take a group of veterans to Everest Base Camp. And Eric and Michael and he were talking, and they said, well, if we're going to be in Nepal, we should climb something. And so it kind of started, that was the germination of, hey, you know what, let's do this thing, let's pick a mountain, let's make a movie, and celebrate the 10th anniversary as well of their successful climb.
Now, as a production team, did you have to scout out those? I mean, because you were at some pretty hairy spots along the way, but did you map that out prior?
No, it's just film as we go. And it was fascinating, too, because Michael, the director, he does something called the Outside Adventure Film School. And he'll take students around the world in various places, Bhutan and down Nepal, out backcountry skiing and things like that, to teach them about adventure filmmaking. So he coordinated and had an adventure film school at the same time we were on the expedition. So we had his film students who were there that he was teaching and letting them do filming, as well as himself and a couple of others as part of this. So we had tons of camera people all over the place. So there was really no planning. It was just, hey, let's see what happens.
So, I mean, was that as difficult? I mean, because the group of veterans were, for the first time, learning to scale a mountain and so forth, and the crew had to all do that as well.
It's actually harder for the crew, I think, because...
Talk about that. Yeah.
So what they'll do is Michael's good enough, and he'll have some ideas because he's been in the Khumbu Valley where we trekked up to this mountain called Lobuche many times. He's summited Everest 5 times with a camera each time. Oh. So he kind of knows, hey, this could be a good shot, and so he might send the camera crews, the students, hey, go to this point and set up. You'll probably get a good shot. And talk about. And so they would rush ahead, get in position, try to get a shot. We would all pass. And then they would have to rush ahead again. So they were working much harder than we were to get back and forth. And it was the same thing when we actually did the summit. Not all of the students were on the summit, though. It was just Michael, Rex Pemberton, who was one of his students, but it was an Australian who was the youngest Australian to do the 7 summits, including the youngest Australian to summit Everest. And so he'd done lots of climbing, so he was up on the mountain as well doing filming. So, and they had to do this leapfrogging, which was exhausting for them. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that.
Oh, okay. You had 11 veterans?
11 veterans.
Now, how did that happen? That's who was there for the climb, or did you have to talk prior, set that up? Or
well, there was, again, it started with World Team Sports, where they had kind of a general idea of who they were looking. I mean, they had some people that they had talked to about, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And so that brought us a few of the veterans. And then they passed the word through to various VA hospitals, some other veterans organizations, caseworkers. And the word kind of spread that, hey, do you have interest in doing this? And, a number of people said, hey, yeah, I'd love to do this. Some of them fell out because we did a couple of different training sessions in Colorado prior to going. They needed to get some experience on first a little bit of altitude, snow, what's it like. And so we lost a couple people that way that just didn't think they could handle it. And then ended up with this group of 11. So there wasn't any kind of formal, application process or anything like that. It was just, hey, who can we get to go that can handle it?
It seemed that the film concentrated on the disabilities and the idea that in these particular wars, there's a whole new technology to help them recover.
Right.
You want to talk a little bit about that, because it seems to be a big part of the film.
What's interesting, I think, for me, is that the physical aspects aren't with medical technology and how fast they can get to somebody who's been wounded in the field and how fast you can get them to care. That's not so much the issue for them, I don't think. Because we had 3 amputees. We had Steve, who was blind, blinded by a roadside bomb. And the physical aspects were, while a challenge, were not as big of a challenge as the emotional side. So when you combine post-traumatic stress with the traumatic brain injuries that they all had, that becomes the challenge. That becomes the mental aspect of how do they push themselves through that side of things. Because, post-traumatic stress has always been around in all wars. It was called different things, and we kind of introduced that at the beginning of the movie. But that's the signature wound of these 2 wars. It's post-traumatic stress. And so if we can use the outdoors and that adventure type experience to create a, not necessarily a comparison, but almost an analogy to what they're facing in combat, that gives them that sense of excitement, adrenaline, and they can recognize that, they can still get some of that, and it doesn't have to be in combat. Because you could ask every single one of these veterans, and if they had the opportunity, they'd go back. They'd go back and do it again, just because there's the sense of almost being alive, even though you're facing death, is really powerful and almost addicting. And they all talked about that. So it's an interesting mix between the physical side and the emotional side.
You're a veteran yourself.
Yes, I am.
Talk a little bit about that.
It's just a number of years ago, I fought in the first Gulf War. So this
Okay.
was back in '91, and I was Air Force, so I flew A-10s.
Wow.
So and that was helpful from the standpoint with this group of veterans, because at least, even, obviously I'm much older than all of them, but I've got combat time. And so that connection allowed me to get a little bit more trust from them right away, so that we could communicate as they needed to and all of that. If there were something that was bothering them on the expedition or something like that, I felt pretty confident when they would come to me and talk, because we had some similarities in that sense, that we'd both seen it. Obviously very different types of combat, but combat nonetheless.
Did you expect the struggle, because we were talking about that just before, a lot of emotion, there's a lot of emotion that came out when retelling their experiences, and these are military that don't want to express their emotions. So talk a little bit about that, because it's very prevalent in the film. Right,
and it's still emotional for me. Watching the screening last night, I still tear up in certain spots, because you don't expect that openness from them. And I don't think we would have gotten it had we tried to do those interviews on the expedition, because most of those emotional interviews actually took place after we'd been home. And then the director and I, Michael, traveled to their hometowns and did these interviews with them by themselves at their homes or wherever it was convenient. But we'd already established a relationship. the expedition established that for us. It created trust.
Sort of broke the ice.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we tried to we would have never gotten that type of emotion if we'd gotten those kind of interviews or tried to get those kind of interviews on the expedition. There were still interviews on the expedition, but not to that extent, not to that depth.
How much video did you have to shoot? I mean, it's a feature, right? Yeah.
I think we narrowed down, we had probably, including interviews, about 75 hours.
Wow.
So we had about 75 hours of footage to narrow down to
Now, how do you cut
92
that down?
minutes.
How do you cut that down?
Our editor is fantastic. Scott McElroy was the editor.
Can you talk a little bit? Yeah.
He had worked with Michael Brown at Serac Films, and we had some general ideas. Obviously, Michael had kind of storyboarded out what he wanted to try to make this look like. And then it was a matter of going through and, finding good shots.
Yeah.
Oh, this is good, and what's the right timeline? And started narrowing that down. Can't even begin to guess how many different iterations we went through to get to this final kind of version. But when we throw in all the interview stuff on top of that, it changed the story somewhat, because we didn't think we were going to get to do those interviews initially, because we didn't have the financing for it. And then when our producer came on board, Don Hahn, that made all the difference in the world.
When did you know you had a film, though? I mean, there's got to be at some point, you take all this footage, you have a basic idea, you storyboard, but then, because I know young filmmakers struggle with that, they'll go,
right.
I'm not sure if I have a film yet.
I think it hit, we put together what we thought was a film and did a screening for a few people in Boulder, at just a small little venue, and just asked for all sorts of feedback. And the movie you see now compared to that was incredibly different.
Oh.
A lot of that from that feedback, but the emotions that were expressed by those people who saw that very first rough cut, that was for me at least, that was when it became, wow, this is really going to hit people. This is really going to work. We've got a lot of work to do still, but that was kind of the point for me where it really kind of hit home.
Right. So it was just a polish thing.
Right.
Figuring out polish. How did the subjects feel watching themselves being so vulnerable at times? I mean, because you got to see that. We can't see that.
Right.
But, yeah, you get to experience it.
I think it was easier for some other, as opposed to others. They were all very positive about the film. All of the veterans think it's great. There's moments where one character in particular, Aaron Isaacson, his first interview with us was very vanilla. We jokingly called him Vanilla Ike. When we did the follow-up interview after we got back from the expedition, and he broke down in a way that just blew us away. We didn't expect it. And I know he's kind of had a hard time. He had to watch it by himself first before he'd even show it to his wife. And he likes it and he appreciates it, but it's a challenge to see someone who considers himself quite the warrior, and he is, to be that vulnerable. Mm. And that in itself takes an excessive amount of strength to be able to do that. And so I think they're all very proud of what they've done. That doesn't make it not, it can be challenging for them to see it sometimes, especially with a big crowd. Has this film
Played in front of a military audience?
A couple of small ones, and we're going to be doing some screenings. We'll actually be going to Fort Lewis, Washington, to the Wounded Warrior Battalion there, Fort Bliss in El Paso, the Wounded Warrior Battalion, and Fort Campbell, Kentucky, for the Wounded Warrior Battalion. I'll be taking that to all three of those places next month. It has been shown to some other small groups, and it's been very positively received.
Okay.
Really have gotten good reviews from the veterans who've seen it.
Now, you have another job outside of producing?
Yes. I'm actually an airline pilot. Okay. So I went from the Air Force for 10 years into a job with United Airlines. So that's my real-time job, or my full-time job is flying airplanes for United.
Wow.
This is just my part-time volunteer gig.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, fascinating. I mean, I just can't imagine flying. I mean, it seems like it'd be just a lot of responsibility.
It's a lot of fun.
You know.
I still enjoy it.
You-
This has been a blast too.
Okay.
I mean, this experience
Yeah.
of being a part of this project has just blown me away. It's really been a lot of fun.
Other screenings. Where might we find it?
We've got we're opening night for the Heartland Film Festival in Indianapolis, so that's kind of big for us. We're doing a bunch of what's called TUG screenings. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. TUG is a website. It's a crowdsourcing website.
Okay.
So we're trying to partner with veterans organizations around the country to let them use the film as a kind of a fundraiser and raising awareness. And so we've had various organizations that said, hey, we want to do a screening in Austin or Dallas or Houston or San Diego or wherever. They coordinate with TUG. They set up a page. They use social media to start selling tickets. And then once they sell the minimum number, the film is brought to a theater there. And so we've got, in those cities I just listed, screenings. There'll be another one in Seattle. We're screening at the Visitor Center at Congressional in Congress. And then we'll actually have a theatrical release on November 2nd in LA, New York, Denver, and Columbus.
Great. And the DVD?
The DVD will be out on Veterans Day.
And you have a website?
Highgroundmovie.com.
Great. Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of the fest.
It's been great being here.
You bet. Bye.
Thanks.